Okay, so we are now 5 minutes in, so I will get started. Just want to let you know the format for today. So it's a 2-hour session and we will have 90 minutes. We have set aside 90 minutes for a Q&A from the panel. This section here is going to be deducted from that. And then we will come to the audience. So please, as per usual, throw your questions in the chat. And we will come to your questions afterwards and we'll bring you in. If you'd like to ask your question personally, let us know that you'd like to ask the question. That's fine as well. We really encourage participation. So as I said, today's the 6th edition. This is Transformational and Authentic Leadership. And we have 3 wonderful speakers with us today. We have Chisom Udeze, who is well, she will introduce herself, but she is the founder of Diversify, and this is an initiative of Diversify. So we're thankful to Chisom. And as I've mentioned to you, Chisom, we have Kevin joining us as well, Kevin Reeder, and we have Kevin's in Oslo, Chisom's in Oslo, and the wonderful Adebayo, who's joining us from London. So thank you for joining us today. And actually, Adebayo, you're a guest with us for the first time today. So in honor of you being a guest for the first time, we'd like to ask you to introduce yourself to everybody today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hyacinth. It's great to be here. Hello, everybody. Hope you've had a wonderful start to your day. I'm Adebayo. I'm based in London. My background is human resources with 15 years experience in different specialisms as well, including talent recruitment, engagement, employer branding, onboarding, driving culture. Currently, I'm a senior talent acquisition partner with the media marketing and advertising agency here in the UK. But I have a huge passion for diversity and inclusion because I truly believe that it adds value, it helps us enrich our culture, it fuels ideas, and it leads to more success for us within our corporate structure. So I'm just excited to be able to be part of this platform today to share from my wealth of knowledge and to also learn at the same time. Everybody's perspective on transformational and authentic leadership. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And then next we will come to you, Kevin.
Kevin unmuted. And yeah, hi everybody, and thanks Hyacinth. Hi, thanks Adebayo, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm actually not in Oslo. I'm in a really exotic place, which is Nesodden, which is a peninsula facing beside 2 fjords facing Oslo. And at the moment, you might see me, I'll apologize in advance, you might see me sort of jumping around in your screen because I'm having to stand up because I'm full of energy and enthusiasm because it's midsummer in Norway, yeah, in Scandinavia, which is great. And that for me means that, I'm full of energy and enthusiasm, so I have to stand up. I do have a seat here, so I may just try to calm down and sit down. Hopefully I will. But I'm passionate about protecting nature and protecting human nature. So that can be at home in people's personal lives. So I do nature immersion and mindful movement activities, workshops. It can be at work, where I do awareness and EQ and well-being workshops and activities through something called Mind Lab Oslo, such as a course I did for her space called The Power of Presence, Positivity and Purpose, I believe. I'm no expert in leadership. I have to say that now as well, but I do know something about self-leadership. So I'll try to calm down, sit down and speak somewhat knowledgeably about that. Thanks.
No, Kevin, don't calm down, don't sit down. Stand up if you want to stand up. I thought you was going to lead us all then in a little stand-up routine. Everybody stand up, stand up. But no, bring the energy, Kevin, bring the energy. We like the energy. That's great. And so to round up our speakers today, we have the wonderful Chisom. And if you would like to introduce yourself, Chisom, that would be fantastic.
Thanks, Hyacinth. I think I was just thinking now, for the people who join us every time, they must be tired of like hearing me say the same thing about myself. So I have to get creative. So hi, everyone. My name is Chisom. I am an economist and a mom to a wonderful 18-month-old. And yeah, I love all things diversity and inclusion. It is, if it could be a love language, it would be my love language. So I'm happy to be here and to have this conversation.
Wonderful, thank you, Chisom. And as you all heard earlier, this meeting is being recorded. So that lovely announcement, and we also we're live on Facebook as well. So just to let you know that if you would like to be present on camera, then of course put your camera on and we will stream you to the world. If not, keep your camera off. We're fine either way. If you don't want to be disturbed by other people on your screen, then just go to speaker view. I think we're all like super conversant in Zoom these days, having used it so much. So yes, let's dive straight in. So 11 minutes in, and I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to go to the first question. And in order to frame this conversation, I would just like to gain each speaker's perspective on what transformational and authentic leadership is. So Adebayo, I'll come to you. What is transformational leadership from your perspective?
Oh, thank you very much. And that's a very intriguing question, one that, you can get so many amazing, fascinating responses to that. For me personally, I think transformational leadership is, the ability to create entrepreneurs out of employees, is creating those mini business owners that take full ownership of their job function. As a leader, you get to understand the vision, the mission, and the goals of the organization, and then you break it down into bits, and you help your team really understand it from their perspective, from their learning style, and then giving them the space to use their creativity, to use their personality to then deliver the results. It's empowering people from a point of support system, giving them all the tools, all the access to information, to training, to mentorship that they need, and then just watch them grow and deliver the success companies need.
Awesome, thank you so much, Ade. Yeah, that type of from what you've described there really takes a lot of courage for leaders when you in that view of raising up entrepreneurs within your organization. It takes courage from a leader. Kevin, we come to you, and what does transformational leadership mean to you?
Oh, Adebayo stole all the good stuff, as always. Yeah, but no, I would say that a transformational leader knows the difference between change and transformation. Certainly in my world, change is like an inevitable part of playing the outer game, being in the outside world. But transformation is a sort of volitional, conscious part of my inner process, of my inner game. So when I'm faced with a challenge or an opportunity, as a leader, then I have to do the inner work first, because I have more control over what's going on the inside of me than what's going on out there in the world. So, of course, the proof is always how I behave then. So I have to do the inside work and then bring it out into how I act and speak and relate. So I sort of walk the talk. I think this is a really vital skill, actually, this sort of, being able to bring inner transformation through to how to change, and then to be able to support others to do the same thing themselves, I think is really key leadership strengths. And, then you're able to broaden people's perspectives. You're able to unveil people's strengths that they're not aware of themselves, for example, or, empower them in that way. What new talents do they have they don't see themselves? And in that way, you can sort of upskill them and start them on the journey of being self-led, autonomous teams, as I think Adebayo was saying. He called them entrepreneurs. And if you want to look into this a little more, then Google Holacrates, which is a new type of organizational sort of form, or a teal organization. They're all based on self-leadership and these type of strengths I'm talking about here.
Yes, brilliant. Yes, Emma, I'll just answer that question straight away. Yes, that's what Kevin was saying. The transformational part being an internal process which will lead to outer change. So leading from the front as a leader. Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. And Chisom, we come to you. What does transformational leadership mean to you, being a transformational leader?
Thanks, Hyacinth, and really good perspective from Adebayo and Kevin. For me, I completely agree with them, and I think of transformational leadership as a type of leadership that brings about change on an individual, community, business, and social system level. A transformational leader creates, valuable and positive change with the ultimate goal of developing stakeholders into leaders. So kind of what Adebayo said, it is also the type of leadership that motivates, it increases morale and the productivity of its people. When I think about transformational leadership, a leader needs to take everything into account, including individual traits, and thus, diversity and intersectionality, organizational culture and characteristics. A few years ago, I think, I read that a transformational leader are sometimes called quiet leaders. They're essentially the type of leaders that lead by example. So the style they use kind of borrows from creating authentic connections with people. They are inspirational, they have empathy, and they engage, with their subordinates or direct reports. And also transformational leaders are, they're confident, courageous, and they work ultimately for the greater good. They are persistent and determined to change or improve processes that no longer works as well as it should. And they are not afraid of shifting the needle or challenging the status quo.
Awesome, brilliant. I love what you said about developing stakeholders into leaders, and from the perspective of a workplace, seeing your employees as stakeholders. I love that. I think that's fantastic. So Adebayo, I'm coming back to you, and for the second part of this, just like to hear your take on authentic leadership.
Yeah, I think for me again, authentic leadership is just being bold and brave to be yourself, to bring your true self to work. You're shaped by all the values, your learnings, your experiences. You don't need to wear a mask to work or conform to a different culture that's not you when you're at work. And I'll give examples in that in the consulting industries or banking or even construction, for instance. Leaders are expected to behave or manage their teams in certain ways. You want to be hard on them. You want to push them through. But if that's not you, then you're not being a true leader by trying to copy what you're not. But is really being in a position where you're open enough, you're vulnerable enough to be yourself, to use your own characteristics and traits and personality to really lead your team and be that example that you want them to be. But that comes with a lot of responsibility. You have to build trust. You have to have a strong relationship with your team as well for it to be able to work. So yes, I think for me, authentic leadership really, yeah, it's just being in a place where you can be yourself with your team, transparent enough in a trusting environment where your human side shines through.
Awesome. You just reminded me of a past leader that I had who modeled himself off the Wolf of Wall Street. And so he would come into the office every day trying to be somebody else. Kevin, will come to you. What does an authentic leader look like to you?
It doesn't look like a wolf in Wall Street, not in my mind anyway. If you know anything about non-violent communication, you've got like a jackal, which is like a wolf on Wall Street, and you have a giraffe, which is like, it's a giraffe type of language because the giraffe's supposed to have the biggest heart of any land animal, so it's an empathic sort of, warm type of communication. So yeah, that's where I'd start really, with authentic, in my experience, and I'm really still trying to learn this myself, as 2 pillars. The first one, as Adebayo was saying, is daring to show up at work, fully show up in my role with all my personality, all my values, strengths, weaknesses, skills, and experience, in a sense, with my full footprint, making a really firm footprint in the environment that I work in. Being willing to collaborate and to co-create and to find common ground, but not to compromise who I am. Not to leave my passion at home, not to leave my values and beliefs at home, not to, leave my sexual, religious, gender orientation at home, to bring all that on and into the workplace. So that's the first part, is daring to show up. Second part is being open to and about the changing nature of who I am. Because my inner game is going on all the time, and I'm changing all the time in response to work, wider life processes, and the people I meet. So it's sort of treating work in this way as a sort of personal and collective development process. That's what I want work to be. That's what I want us all to see, that's what work has always been about, is this personal and collective development. And of course, then if I'm a leader, then I should be supporting others to do the same thing, that to make their footprints with full impact, which means, their responsibility or my responsibility then is to make that a really clear footprint. And then the culture or the organization's responsibility is to be open to that, so that my footprint falls on very sort of open ground, which is receptive. In that way, all my talent, strengths, whatever I've got to bring, have the most impact. And I would say, just very briefly finishing off, that both transformational and authentic leadership, to me, they're all in their core about self-leadership, and I'm going to get an opportunity to talk a little about that later.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you. Like you were saying about having the courage to show up fully and make a firm footprint, leadership can actually be quite scary and intimidating for some people. So it still does sometimes demand courage of us. So Chisom, and we're going to just finish off this section with yourself, with you giving us your perspective of an authentic leader.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about how to reframe it a bit away from the perspective of because I think Adebayo and Kevin have done a fantastic job at that. So from a principle standpoint, authentic leadership is based, on the principle that leaders can nurture sincere relationships with their direct reports or subordinates or stakeholders, and they value their inputs and contributions. So an authentic leader encourages their people to be more open and highlight and celebrate their contribution and supports in the success of the organization. So an authentic leader also recognizes that you're no one without your people. Authentic leaders are self-actualized. They are self-aware. They know their strengths. They know their weaknesses. They know their emotions. And more importantly, they know their limitations. They have many characteristics, including but not limited to, like I said, self-awareness. They lead with the heart. They have integrity. They're transparent. They're mission-driven and focused on long-term results. And they shared the success with the team. And to round up here, authentic leaders, they show their real selves, not a version of who they think a leader should be. So not the wolf of Wall Street or the lady from I forgot that scary Miranda from that movie way ago that I can't remember now, but they are consistent. You know, they don't hide their mistakes or weaknesses on the basis of fear or weakness, and they stand up for what they believe in. They also realize that being self-actualized is a never-ending journey. And then the movie I was thinking about is Devil Wears Prada. If you've not seen it, go watch it. Thank you.
You're welcome. We're coming up with lots of movie references today, so lots of movies for you to go back to. Thank you so much, Chisom. Just one thing, I'm always taking notes as I'm listening. I tend to always write. I always have a pen and paper. I'm always writing, jotting things down. And what I jotted down here is, you know, an authentic leader recognizes that their people are their strength. I love that. I think that's fantastic. So I'm going to stick with you, Chisom, and ask you, you know, are there any other types of leadership styles, and could you explain them to us briefly? And what's the difference to, you know, transformational, authentic leadership?
Okay, I'm going to try to do this quickly, but at the same time, try to remember some of them. I may not cover all of them, so do not crucify me for that. But I'm going to talk about what comes to mind: authoritarian leadership, participative, delegative, transactional, and transformational. So authoritarian leadership, it's the style of leadership that, you know, allows the leader to impose expectations and define outcome. This type of leadership is, you know, it's a one-person show, you know, and it can be useful when the leader is the most knowledgeable in the team. It can also be quite efficient when you're working on that tight time constraints. Creativity is pretty much out of the window because there's limited input from the team. The next one I'm going to talk about is delegative leadership. It's a style based on allocating tasks or allotting tasks to team members. It's a useful strategy if your team members are competent, if they take ownership and responsibility, and they prefer to work individually. However, you know, differences among the team members may arise, and that could very easily divide the group, which might lead to low enthusiasm, morale, and confidence. The next one I'll talk about is transactional leadership. It's basically what it sounds like. It works on trades, it's a give and take, and it's on the basis of transactions between a leader and their direct reports. So herein you have to deal with incentives, punishments, rewards, and other interchanges, you know, in order to get the job done. So in this situation, the leader normally sets out very clear goals, and the team member knows beyond doubt that they will be rewarded if they comply or if they do the job accordingly. And this type of relationship usually works on a basis of having set procedures and practices that work efficiently. The next I'm going to talk about is participative leadership. I think that's the fourth one. It's basically based on democratic theory. This style of leadership, you know, team members are included in the decision-making process. You know, this makes team members obviously feel engaged and motivated to contribute and be productive because they're included. And although the team is included in the decision-making process, the leader normally has the last word in the decision-making, which brings me to the last one, I believe, transformational leadership, how it differs. So, you know, like we talked about Adebayo and Kevin and myself earlier, you know, we talked about transformational leadership being more or less a leader that inspires himself or, you know, their followers with a vision, and, you know, a transformational leader encourages and empowers them to achieve it. You know, and I believe this concept of, or I know this concept of transformational leadership came from James Burns, if I recall correctly, in his 1978 book called Leadership. And basically he described this type of leadership as, you know, a process where leaders and their followers challenge and encourage each other to higher levels of morality, motivation, integrity, and fairness. So to round up here, research shows that groups of people that are led by transformative or transformational leaders have higher levels of performance than groups led by any other types of leaders, because the high expectations of transformational leaders give their direct reports the self-confidence to persist in the face of setbacks, which often leads to exceptional performance.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those descriptions, Chisom. And I have a question for the audience, actually. Do any of you recognize yourselves in any of those leadership styles that Chisom broke down for you there? And would you like to make any changes based on what you've just heard Chisom say? So 2 questions for the audience. I'd like to thank Kirsty and Gina and Nora for putting questions in the chat. Keep your questions coming. We're going to address all of your questions later on. You may get some answers. I've got a list of questions that I'm going to ask the speakers. So you may get some answers throughout the conversation, but we can come back and address your questions at the end, see if you received answers anyway. So thank you. Keep the questions coming, guys. So Adebayo, in your career history within HR and your wider field, you've come across a lot of leaders that you yourself personally consider transformational. Could you share with us what the common personality traits were with those leaders?
Well, yes, I've been privileged to have worked with some really amazing leaders, in different organizations, and it just encourages me to know that such leaders exist. And so, other leaders that are not transformational or are not displaying key leadership, traits don't have an excuse really. I Anyone that would have done the research probably might have discovered the 4 I's when it comes to, transformational leadership traits. But I created an acronym for Pepsi. Not because it's my favorite drink. It has no link to the Pepsi drink. I'm not advertising it here. But for me, Pepsi means the physical, emotional, psychological, social, and intellectual part of either a person or even a job function. So it's something that you can use to apply to any work aspect of it. So in regards to transformational leadership and the personalities or traits, I just want to quickly run through some of those using the Pepsi acronym for it. So if we're looking at the physical, for a transformation leader, the important thing, for your team is for you to be there, to be present, to be accessible, to be approachable. They need to be able to, open up and talk to you as well. So you have to have that, character of being able to listen, being able to pay attention, to communicate as well. When it comes to emotional, then you're someone that, yes, being authentic allows you to display some emotions within the trust space, but you're also someone that can help build the positive emotions within your team members. You can inspire, you can create that buy-in, you can help them look at the company they work for as family, rather than just as a job place as well. When you're talking about psychological, it's just creating those positive mindsets, that building that growth mindset within them, that they can achieve this, they can do this, they can be successful. And that applies to yourself as well. As a transformational leader, you have to always wake up believing that I can do this, I can achieve this, I can be successful as well. And then obviously the social traits are, be human. get to know your team, build that one-on-one relationship with them, find that level of intimacy professionally, that bonds you together, that makes you go above and beyond just the normal, duties the day-to-day brings. Be there at their ceremonies, at their weddings, go watch a movie together with them. The social aspect outside work actually influences positively, the characteristic and the work ethic within your workspace. So, spending time outside work actually helps add value to being inside work. And then finally, intellectual is really just challenging them, pushing them to do more, but from a positive perspective, from an encouraging perspective. And again, that's just yourself. Keep on learning. You're always aware, you're always curious, you're always looking for better ways that things can be done, that you can achieve more. So for me, I would say yes, those that Pepsi, is something that every transformational leader should look for within themselves, within their job function, and also within their team.
Thank you so much. Just for anybody that missed it, could you just repeat the definition of the Pepsi acronym?
Yes, definitely. So the first P is for physical, and then you have emotional, and then psychological, and then social, and then finally intellectual. And again, this is something you can use for any aspect of your life. If like me, you want to maybe lose some weight, you can apply that as well. What are the physical things you need to do? What are the ways you have to manage your emotions? What are the psychic that have to be in place? How does being social, taking a walk, walking your dog, and all that help with it? And how does that impact your level of intelligence or intellectual, or your learning, your openness to learn as well?
Awesome, thank you. I am going to adopt that for my next few months of my weight loss journey. I will turn 50 and be fabulous. So I'm going to use the Pepsi model to get there. Thank you so much. All right, Kevin, we're coming to you. And you mentioned earlier self-leadership. So what does self-leadership look like practically, and how can we practice self-leadership?
Well, I have this wonderful acronym, COCA. No, I don't. But I could have. I've got a love-hate relationship with acronyms, but that was a beautiful one, Adebayo. So I'm going to try and Pepsi my way through life. I usually say that I try and doobie-doobie-doo my way through life, but maybe I'll try Pepsi in my way through and see how that goes. But the self-leadership, that in my understanding of self-leadership anyway, comes from positive psychology and emotional intelligence, and especially the work of Daniel Goleman, who focused a lot on positive leadership, and which has sort of 4 pillars. And self-management, self-leadership, or emotional regulation, there's different phrases used for it, is one of those 4 pillars. And it's about regulating, and I'm back to the internal processes again, regulating the internal processes so that I can decide how to speak and act and do. I was listening to the Dalai Lama recently, who was saying, surprisingly enough, that he was and still is to some degree an angry young man. And he was talking about how he was in his teens a really angry young man, and that he sees how he's had a lifelong process to bring that sort of, to do his internal processing, his emotional hygiene, and to change his reactions around, because he can't stop the anger arising, but he can do something skillful so it doesn't become a destructive emotion, which leads him to harm himself or others. So now he says he gets angry slower, so he notices it easier. He's quicker to recover, to turn that around. And then he's better to return to calm and clarity so that he can make better responses and take better decisions. And part of that is being willing to sort of work with the energy of anger, really, not to suppress it, not to act it out, but to be willing to work like the Dalai Lama and over time to sort of use. He says he turned the underlying energy of anger for him turns now into determination and focus. So he's a very determined, over a long period of time, very focused guy. And all that stuff is based on self-awareness, which I'm going to come back to again and again and again. But Daniel Goleman, the expert on this, he said that there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm going to just mention them briefly, elements to self-leadership, self-management, emotional regulation. First of all, has been if you meet a leader who's emotionally agile, then you know they're heading in this direction. You know, the people who manage and exploit disturbing feelings and emotions in a good way. When you meet a manager who's transparent, and by that I mean who's aligned with their values and is sort of has an attitude of, is inclusive of other people's values, you know, and that includes admitting your own mistakes when you're faced with someone else's values and seeing that something is more appropriate, another value is more appropriate in a particular setting. So that's emotionally agile, transparent, adaptable, you know, that as a manager, they manage demands without exhausting themselves, getting stressed out and burnt out, without getting unfocused. And part of that is sort of that the manager can accept change, adapt to change. And then there's, you know, they're always learners and doers. You know, I'm not so keen on the sort of out and out doers, but the learners and doers as managers, I get on really well with. They usually have high standards. And they're good at supporting and challenging me so that I can, you know, create learning out of my challenges and my mistakes as well. So they, you know, they say my mistakes are okay as long as I learn from them. You know? And they're also adventurers, which I really like. You know, they're sort of people who create and seize on opportunities and are willing to explore new directions. They're always the first person to break into that new sort of field and things, test it out. And they're also optimists, you know, so when you meet that leader who's positive and sees and supports the best in other people, then you've met one of these self-leaders. And they don't have to be leaders, they're just people taking self-leadership seriously. I read something earlier on the wall upstairs in my house that my daughter, a wise young woman, wrote, and it's on a little poster, and it says, taking a step back after a step forward is not a defeat, it's more like a charger. So that's the type of optimism I think that these leaders have. You know, they say that no, we can do that, we can make mistakes, we can fall back. It's all part of the charger. And just finally, why is that so important? Because it gives you, when you act this way, a real sense of well-being and empowerment and connection to others. And also there's lots of research that shows the return on investment, if you like, or the results of this. Here's one number for you. 67% of the abilities that make the difference for real top performers are emotional competencies. They're not IQ and they're not technical expertise. So twice as important as technical expertise and IQ are emotional intelligence factors. And in addition to that, when it comes to leadership, a lot of research is showing that about up to 90% of the success of really good leaders is attributed to emotional intelligence. So that self-leadership as part of an emotional intelligence toolbox is extremely important for a leader at the moment in the world, as crazy as it is.
Wow, thank you so much, Kevin. That's brilliant. So between Adebayo's Pepsi and Kevin's Coca, we're equipped now to be awesome, transformational and authentic leaders. Thank you, guys. This is gold that you're giving us here today. I'd just like to say as well, usually I have my screen on a speaker view, but today I've got, you know, everybody on my screen, and actually Stan and Ro, you guys have beautiful smiling photos. So every time I look at my screen, not only can I see all the wonderful participants who are on cameras who are smiling and enjoying, but I can see your faces smiling back at me as well. So thank you. It's lots of love and light coming at me. So thank you, guys. That's beautiful. Right, so Chisom, now we're going to come back to you, and this one might be a little bit difficult to answer, and it could kind of demand a bit of a long answer from you, but I will ask you to, limit the answer. But how can we be transformational leaders in diverse environments? So, people with lots of various cultural backgrounds and different personalities, experiences, intersectionalities, skill sets, how can we be transformational leaders in that type of environment?
Thanks, Hyacinth. I think you know me well enough to know the type of questions I can talk about.
Well, I was thinking intersectional, and I was like, well, once that word gets in there, Chisom is going to be like, that's my word, and she's going to go. So, no, but I'm really looking forward to hearing you answer this. Thank you.
Yes, so how can one be a transformational leader in face of diversity, intersectionality, culture, all of that good stuff? I think the question is, how can you not be? People are intersectional. They have various layers, cultures, and skill sets. If you cannot see and value and respect each person as they are, how can you support and inspire them? How can you develop them? How are you able to meet them where they are and give them the tools and resources to get them where they can or need to be? How can you know what they need, and how can you connect their sense of identity and self to the mission and collective identity of the company? It's going to be hard to really see and include all people in your team without appreciating their intersectionality and diversity. Now, the fact remains that organizations have goals, and leaders need to get the team to buy in to execute those goals. And one of the ways to do this is to work collectively to connect your team's sense of identity to the identity of the company and its mission. And it is very important for transformational leaders to be role models and lead in a way that inspires. They need to challenge those around them to take greater ownership for their work. In addition, they need to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of their people so they can align, the responsibilities that actually enhances their people's performance. So to be a transformational leader in the face of diversity and intersectionality, I think you have to see and celebrate each person as they are authentically, and develop them to work towards that goal, towards the goal of your organization. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Wow, thank you. I was almost a little bit shocked then. Was that a pause? Was she finished? Brilliant. Thank you so much, Chisom. You always have so much goodness to contribute. So Adebayo, I'm thinking of throwing you under the bus a little bit, bringing your HR angle back into perspective, and just thinking about the recruitment process. So how can companies ensure that they're recruiting capable leaders?
Yeah, wow, that's a very interesting question.
And not just capable, but flexible as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kevin really touched on it when he talks about self-leadership and emotional intelligence, and as opposed to technical abilities. And I think when you're talking about recruiting leaders, you're not thinking about hiring product line managers. You're thinking about people that can take the passion of the vision and the mission of the company and really drive that through all the different processes, through the teams, and cascade it down in such a way that it creates a buy-in with the teams to be able to, take up their positions and really do it to the best of their ability. So I think for me and my experience of hiring, directors or regional EMEA roles, it's more around the type of conversations you have with them. It's not necessarily about interviewing about give me an example of how you did this. What was the outcome? What did you do? What was the result? It's knowing more about who they are, what drives them, what wakes them up in the morning, why they do what they do, what is their why, and seeing how that aligns to your company culture, aligns to your vision, and to really see if this is somebody that, if they are fully equipped with the knowledge, with the tools, will be passionate enough to drive and take it forward. Um, you know, it it boils down again to your brand, to who you are. I always say that value attracts value. If your company brand, if your company image, if the stories about who you are out there on Glassdoor and the different, comparison sites for employers, if it's not great, then true great leaders won't want to come work for you in the first place. So you also have to revisit your culture, revisit your branding, revisit what you stand for in the public eye, and then leverage on that to engage with the right leaders. Sometimes you feel you can shape someone at that level into a leadership position, but unfortunately that's not always the case. You have to choose: do I want a leader to take us to the next level, or do I want someone to really, an authoritarian or a delegator, like Chisom said, to just try to push through for results. And in the end, you always find that even though getting short-term results might work for you, leadership actually is what you need to grow, your company into the future. And yeah, recruiting leadership starts with really just knowing who that person is, what they stand for, what they love, what drives them, and having a conversation rather than trying to fit interview questions around job functions. It's about the person rather than the JD.
Awesome. And when you started that, you could have just dropped the mic right there, Adebayo. When you said it's about the person, it's not about, qualifications, it's connecting vision, values, mission. Because yeah, you're quite right. They're the real qualities of a leader. I love that you say value attracts value. That was beautifully put. Thank you so much for that. So Chisom, coming back to you. And excuse me, frog in my throat. Let me clear my throat. So Chisom, coming back to you. So from your experience as a leader, at what point, this is a two-part question, by the way, at what point does someone become a transformational and authentic leader? So that's the first part of the question. And then the second is, how do you practice authentic and transformational leadership? So drawing on your experience.
Okay, thanks, Hyacinth. So the first part is at what point, and the second is how do I practice it? So I think people who know me, and including my team, they know, I mean, this is a safe space, so I can say this, that I really get frustrated when I see events about inclusive leadership or that leadership, and people claim that badge as inclusive leaders because they have people with 10 nationalities or even 100 nationalities in their team. So I don't think that you become an authentic or transformational leader when you think you are. you become one when others, your team, your employees, they tell you that you are. A job title in leadership or a managerial role does not automatically make you a transformational, authentic, or even an inclusive leader. Having a diverse team does not make you an inclusive leader. You know, and like I said, I see many people claiming themselves as, you know, inclusive, authentic, and, you know, transformational leaders, like it's their birthright. It's not. You know, and after you've reached that level of authenticity and your team and your people see you as transformational, you don't stop, you must continue. You know, you don't receive that badge of honor from your people and say like, oh, now I'm good. You know thereafter that more than ever, you must continue to do and put in the work. So that is the point, and it doesn't really stop. You have to continue. And on how I practice authentic and transformational leadership, I endeavor to lead by example. You know, I practice what I preach. I try to the best of my ability. If I cannot show up as my full self to work, how can I expect my team to? I also practice radical honesty, not just at work, in my life in general. And my mom is not always happy with this part of me. And it's hard, you know, and in practicing radical honesty, I also ensure that I have high expectations of and for my team, and I communicate that, among other things, you know, and I am very much a work in progress. I have gotten it wrong on a few occasions in the past. I'm sure I will get it wrong again, but I never make the same mistake twice. So I endeavor to learn from my mistakes.
Awesome. Thank you, Chisom. I love that you said that, you know, becoming a transformational leader, you don't become it when you think you are it. You know, it's something that happens to you along the way. And I think a good litmus test actually of whether or not you are a transformational leader is whether people you have led in the past still come to you and still see you as a leader in their life, even though you're not in an official employed role or whatever your role was in that capacity, their leader. So, you know, that'd be a great litmus test for all of us to know whether or not people we have led still come to us to be led. So we are now nearly halfway through the session. It's 13:57. We've got about 30 or so more minutes of the Q&A with the panel. I'm really enjoying the information that's coming at us today. I think there's lots of gold here, as is per usual. And I'm loving the conversation. So we're going to dive in the last 30 minutes. Don't forget, keep your questions coming. We've got some questions in the chat. You may have already received partial answers, but we'll come back and address them and see if you received an answer, if you've got anything else, or if you'd like to ask a question personally yourself. So, Kevin, I'm going to come to you now and ask you, how can one be truly authentic at work? And why is it important for leaders to encourage a type of authenticity? Why is it, you know, important to encourage it? Sorry, before you start, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of the day. Thank you. Come back to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Hyacinth. And I want to say thanks for great moderation, because I mean, I was just like, there were so many nods going on in the rooms, in the different windows now, and so many nods going on inside of me to, like, you know, when first of all, how good was it that you threw a Londoner in front of a bus, you know, and we saw what came out of that. That was just brilliant, Adebayo. That was so good. So I really felt inspired listening to you. And then you throw this really juicy bone at Chisom, because you know she can get her teeth into that. That was just so good. So good. So where am I at the moment? You know, I think Adebayo said something about brand. And now for me, that's, you know, personal brand, that's all about being, you know, it's about how I can be truly me and how I can help other people be truly their best versions of themselves. So it's about being, and it's about openness. And I think that's authenticity of work is about that. It's about being and openness. It's about being the true sort of 360 version of yourself and being open to other people's 360 versions, you know, however fussy, dirty, otherwise that can be sometimes. And also, like I said earlier, being sort of open to that sort of change in landscape as well, because the changing nature of who you are, when you're allowed to be who you are, that starts to flow and change and morph into better versions of yourself, you know. So we have to really be willing to bring our inner game to play into the workspace, and for the culture to operate around with it, with a sort of shared understanding that the inner game is important to have, as well as our outer game. In a sense, I see that as a sort of move from striving at work, which is what I hear a lot about when I coach people these days, about achieving, competing, fitting in, getting noticed. And from going from that striving mode to a thriving mode, where we're starting to help bring about and really fully engage with co-creating things, sharing things, supporting people, getting the support we need, and growing. And I think there's some real leadership skills which I try and focus on. And now we're not going to go to analogies and acronyms. I don't have a Pepsi, but I love alliteration, if you know what that is. I'm a language guy. So the leadership skills I like to focus on are the sort of the quadruple A's. It's attention, awareness, acceptance, and appreciation. If you manage to develop those as a leader, whatever sort of tag you put on the type of leadership you're doing, it's going to be good. If you know how to bring your attention to something that's important, your full awareness to what's going on around you at the same time, bring a sense of acceptance to that, and get to the stage where you can appreciate whatever it is that's going on as well. You're in a really good place to create an antidote to the other, the quadruple S's that I see a lot of in workplaces. So those S's are stress, speed, silos, and seriousness. Yeah. So those, you know, that's the sound you make in pantomimes in England, I think, isn't it, Adebayo, where, you know, the thief comes on, or the baddie comes on, you know. So these are the things that we want out of the workforce, I think. Too much stress, too much speed, too much siloing, and too much seriousness. And I think this is really vital for authentic leadership and authentic cultures, because if you're starting to do this, if you're starting to bring attention, awareness, acceptance, and appreciation to your relationships and to what's going on, the processes that are going on, then you're starting, as Adebayo was saying, you're starting to develop these self-led, autonomous, he called them entrepreneurs, you know, maybe I see them as consultants, you know, the sort of people who are, you know, then naturally creative, content, focused, kind with each other, positive, and really productive when we're in that mode. Check it out, you know, when you're in that creative flow, when you're sort of content about the situation you're in, when you're focused and you're kind and receiving kindness, all this positivity makes you extremely productive. That's what authentic at work is about for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. So I was just thinking, and thank you for the beautiful alliteration there as well. Lovely. I was just thinking, in the last hour, we've been to the movies, we've been refreshed with some Pepsi and some Coca, and you know, we've also now just been to the theatre as well. So this is turning out to be a very creative session here today. Lovely. So Chisom, I'm going to come back to you, and you know, from your experience as a leader, how do you personally, and how can other leaders navigate that fine line between being an authentic, so you want to create space for transformation for your team, so you're bringing in your authentic self, bringing more of yourself to the workplace, but how do you navigate that fine line in that space? So in other words, you know, be a friend but without losing authority. How do you do that?
Good question. I think it's a tough one, you know, because yeah, it's a tough one. But since we're talking about authentic leadership, I like to think that authenticity requires radicalization to a point. You know, to be authentic, you need to be single-minded about not compromising on your values, on who you are. And that is everything, you know? And if people know this about you, you can be a friend and still lead and garner respect from your team. And this does not mean that authentic leaders, you know, are soft or, you know, pushovers. Actually, because communicating directly is critical to successful outcomes. But that type of directness and authenticity has to be done with respect and empathy. Now, this said, a leader does not have to be your bestie. And in many cases, they cannot even be a friend, depending on how big an organization is, you know. But when you run a smaller team, you might find yourself in a situation where your team members are also friends. In some situations, in this case, tough love may be necessary, especially when people, you know, there are people on your team who are disruptive. You know, and I suppose there are also various ways that people can navigate this fine line depending on their personality. For my personality, you know, like I said earlier, it's radical honesty. You know, it is essentially the practice of complete honesty and refraining from even telling white lies. And I think my team know that I can be quite direct and will always speak my mind as I see it. And I'm learning to do that with empathy and with respect, you know, and this is not just something that I endeavor to do in the workplace, but also just in my life in general. So it's kind of a what you see is what you get type situation. But this said, I think it's important to also clarify here that authority should not be the goal of leadership. We as leaders need to learn to lead with, beyond, and without authority. It should never be the goal.
No, I agree with you. It should never be the goal. I guess that if you're leading well and in your authenticity, that authority will be present anyway as a leader when you're leading. That's fabulous. I love that. Thank you so much. So, Adebayo, so this is all about diversity and, you know, inclusion in the workplace. And when companies are implementing DEIB strategies, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging strategies in the workplace, they tend to think sometimes that a workshop will solve a problem or, you know, will educate the workforce. So from your experience in HR, what are realistic timeframes for organizations to actually implement and adopt sustainable organizational change?
Well, thank you, Hyacinth. That's a brilliant question. You know, first of all, you know, I just want to say to any organization out there that, you know, is making an attempt to implement, you know, DEIB in their workplace, you know, well done on taking that first step or, you know, trying to improve diversity within your workforce. And I hope you're doing it not just as a tick box exercise, but because you've really seen the values and the, you know, the returns that it will bring to your culture, to your success, to your bottom line. And then just to really dive into the question, I mean, change is not a sprint, you know, especially within diversity and inclusion. It's more of a marathon. It doesn't happen overnight. You won't suddenly, you know, resolve the issues, get all your answers, transform into, you know, a perfect balance, you know, D&I workplace. It takes time and it takes commitment. So I think the first responsibility always still lies on the leadership. You know, their buy-in, their commitment to it. If diversity or DEIB is at the top 3, of their key, directives, then it will always be on top of their minds. If it's not, especially coming out of the pandemic, companies are focused on diverse other things like, oh, let's just get back to work. Let's just get people back in the office. Let's just get moving back again and making some profits. And they're missing the opportunity that they really need to embed the DEIB into the workflow at this stage. But realistically, one workshop or a couple of sessions in a series will at best just create curiosity. Okay. And then, the more you attend, the series, then that will lead to an awareness, and then awareness will lead to a paradigm shift, a mindset challenge. And that's the point where you begin to think, okay, am I taking this forward, or am I resisting? And once you can, get through that barrier, then your mind opens up to possible changes and to new meanings or new ways of doing things. So I'll say a realistic time frame depends on what aspect of DEIB you're trying to implement. It will depend on the buy-in on not just the leaders, but the key stakeholders, the heads of department, and even the diverse group that may feel they are being affected by it. For instance, if you wanted to improve, women in leadership, for instance, how would that make men or managers feel about that? Would they feel that the opportunity is being taken away from them because you're trying to improve women in leadership? And so how do you manage that process? How do you help them understand that as well? So yes, I'll say something that it's long term anyway, and look at it this way from the bigger picture. If you're trying to create future success and you're trying to grow your business, then it is worth the long-term investment. It's something you need to review over 3 months, review over 6 months, review over 12 months to see where you are, to compare to where you were, and to put in future plans as well. But don't get me wrong, you can get immediate results and get some immediate wins. You can immediately start seeing some transformation happening, which is good, which will be encouraging. But for you to truly get to where you want to be, again, depending on what you have in mind, that's going to take some time. Not just a workshop, not just a few sessions in a series.
Awesome, thank you so much.
I'll add something here, if it's
sure.
And I completely agree with what Adebayo said, and I got struck, when he's talked about, the involving the people who are often at the receiving end of this. And I think one of the questions that, say, leaders here, can ask themselves is everyone in the room? If you're trying to improve a process, if you're trying to increase women in leadership, women in the room, if you're trying to make your space more conducive to people with disability, are they in the room having that conversation? Because it gets to, you arrive at your destination, if there's one, where the people who are most affected by the lack tell you that you've arrived there. And I also want to bring in a point here of psychological safety, because sometimes, when we as leaders are wanting to be more diverse and inclusive and implement, more processes, sometimes we look in-house for that, and on one hand, I understand that sometimes this is efficient and could be productive, but this also reduces I think, to a point, the ability for your people to be brutally or radically honest, with that process. So you could say, all right, we have our lead HR person here running, 10 DEI sessions. And after 10 DEI sessions, we should be good. And your people might want to say, no, I think we actually need more. We need to talk about this and this and that. But they cannot actually do that because they don't feel psychologically safe to do so. So I also recommend in situations like this to also bring somebody who is not in-house, who is not as emotionally invested in the process, because they can also give us as leaders clarity, and I'm saying this as well from personal experience. I've brought in a lot of leaders to work with me and my team on communication, on team culture. Hyacinth also runs session for my team. Not that I cannot, study up and do the sessions myself, but I know that I cannot be as pragmatic, and efficient as I need to be. So just wanted to add that here.
Sure, no problem. And actually, as Adebayo was speaking, as you were speaking, I realized that I didn't introduce myself in the beginning, but it's okay. The company that I run, Yod Consult, that I founded, we, for that very purpose of, including the psychological safety and also the process of change, don't do one-off workshops. All of our workshops range from 3 months up to 12 months. They're actually programs that we facilitate to bring about that change. And I love that you talked about the paradigm shift. That's where you get the change, when you have a paradigm shift. So staying with the educational side of this, Kevin, I wanted to ask you, how long does the process take for an individual to reskill or upskill themselves from your experience?
Great. Well, I'm so happy that we're going into the sort of, long-term, profound change experience acknowledgement here. So thanks for that, both Chisom and Adebayo, for taking us there. And I would say yes, and I think this is why you come to me, Hyacinth, because you want me to make something simple, or you want me to allow me to be a bit superficial or simplistic, let's say that, because I certainly am very engaged in sustainability, whether it's sustainability for the planet or whether it's social sustainability. And I know it's long-term, deep processes. They take time and they take a lot of personal and collective effort and insight. And to not be overwhelmed by the idea of transforming ourselves and our environments, then we have to crack this down into body and mind hacks and simple things so that we can just get on with it. So I often lean on the neuroscience research, which often reflects military practice and performance coaching in sports and business, where on average, they'd say that, if you're going to work on bringing about or changing a habit or a way of being and doing, or to develop a completely new one, you need to go at this for 60 days before you can expect to see results. And that 60 days means lots of repetition during that period. It means setting up a process where you're working consistently, hopefully together with support, for 60 days. And in terms of like the repetitions you need to do, it's just like being in a gym. That sort of, you need to do your reps. And if you do in that period, or in that process, for a particular element of the change you need, if you're repeating that 300 times, then you intellectually start to remember to do that. So after you've done it repeated, my little yoga routine I'll do in the morning, I've repeated that 300 times, then I start to remember, okay, that's the position I get into next. When I've done it 3,000 times, then I don't need to use any cognitive ability to remember that anymore. My body remembers it. So it just becomes part of my automatic behavior, like brushing my teeth, for some people driving a car, tying your shoelaces. That happens without us thinking about it at all. We get it free of charge. But you've got to be willing to do your 3,000 reps to get that. So often when I try and introduce awareness and EQ processes in the workplace, what I call the inner game training, then I've got the 3 R's. Here comes some more alliteration for you guys. 3 R's. First is the routines. And if you bring lots of awareness to that, they become rituals. So you've got to map out the routines that are going to bring about the change. You've got to do them with lots of awareness, then they'll become rituals, so you become much more energized doing them. So that's the first R. Then there's a repetition, which I've just talked about. And then you need reminders, because why do we need reminders? And especially at work, and especially when things are busy and things are moving fast and we're being challenged, we need reminders. So for me, it can be, I don't know whether you can see it, you probably can, that sort of thing, you know? That's lots of reminders for me, so that every time I walk past it, it's like, whoa, I'm supposed to get in touch with Hyacinth about that website. Oh, I've got to do that coaching with Stein Udvar. Whoa, I've got to remember to do this. And when I work with coaching people, they have all sorts of ways to remember to do their little bit of practice. For some people, it might be every time they go to the coffee machine, I remember. For someone else, they said, we were doing a very simple breathing practice. It was like every time she walked up or down the stairs at work or took the elevator, she would do a practice. So it's just to set up these sort of reminders that make it easier for us to do all the reps we need to do, and to do it with lots of awareness, so that we turn them into rituals, and so that we get the change that we need in our 60-day period. Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that made perfect sense. Thank you. And for those of us who are digital dinosaurs that don't use technology for reminders, I'm like you, Kevin. I love, I have a big wall calendar. I love whiteboards. I love Post-its. I like to see everything visual. So yes, I'm a proud digital dinosaur. Right, so we have 10 minutes left, or 9 minutes, should I say, of this section. So I have 2 questions left that I'd like to throw to the panel, but instead of directing them specifically, I'm just going to ask the question and then just ask one of you to jump in to answer. So bear in mind we have 9 minutes left, and then we're going to go to the audience to answer their questions. So how can a leader navigate resistance to DEIB change initiatives? Kevin, you're on mute. Yes.
Can I have one of the 3 minutes?
Go ahead.
Because I'm really passionate about this. I'm really passionate about normalizing resistance, because all the brain science says that resistance is natural. It's our sort of, and we have to accept it. It's the only way to deal with it in a good way. It's our natural mental emotional response to any change and any challenges. Resistance, you know. Sometimes you think, no, that's not me. I love, you know, the new stuff. But your brain will work in this way, whether you're aware of it or not. You know, it's the fastest part of the brain, so it captures and deactivates the sort of command center in your brain. But once you acknowledge that that's going on and you bring some acceptance to it, then you can do carefrontations with people, you know, rather than confrontations when you don't want to be where you are. It's part of building sort of EQ, you know, it's your sort of inner game stuff again. So my resistance is just autopilot a lot of the time, and sometimes it's from true concern, and I've got to discern which one it is. And once I've done that, then I can have a strategy. 2 strategies, very simple to deal with it. Then I either see that, yes, okay, I've got a sort of a real true concern about what's going on, then I engage to influence things, you know, or I see that it's autopilot, it's just this mental reaction. I've got to sort of take a deep breath, and I've just got to accept and cooperate. So it's engage and influence, or accept and cooperate in my mind.
Lovely. Awesome. Love that perspective. Normalize it, and then, you know, bring some acceptance and then engage. Fantastic. Chisom, you put up your hand. You'd like to go next?
Yes. So on change and resistance, you know, there's this running idea that people are afraid of change. Mm-hmm. I don't believe people are afraid of change, because if someone tells you, hey, I'm going to add $100,000 to your salary, that is a change, you're going to be like, oh, yes, please, right? So I think that people are afraid of the uncertainties that come with change. They're afraid of what they can lose. when a change happens that has not been the status quo. So I think that a leader can navigate resistance first by trying to understand the cause of that resistance. What are you afraid of losing? Right? To solve something, you need to be able to understand it. And in looking for solutions, you may actually find a middle ground that reduces resistance. Now, this said, you cannot actually only be an authentic or transformational leader for people who easily align with your values and efforts. Actually, I would say that resistance is necessary to test your resilience as a transformational leader. Transformational leaders are those leaders who can cause a change in individual and social systems. So you need to be able to influence behavior and structures and change them.
Wonderful. Adebayo, would you like to add to that quickly?
Yeah, just a quick point, and just referencing, what Chisom said earlier, and also what you do, Hyacinth, is, to call in the experts. As a leader, you might not have all the answers. Being true to yourself means that, you might not be able to provide, that or channel through that resistance by yourself. Call in the experts. And sometimes it's easier and better for the team to hear from outsiders than from yourself. So yeah, calling the experts.
Awesome. I always think of a family, sometimes for children, it's easier to accept something from an aunt or an uncle rather than from the parents directly. So we always think of that with employees as well. Okay, so the last question, we have 5 minutes left. We're doing brilliantly here. I always like to end every session with your top 3 tips. So top 3 tips on how to be a transformational and authentic leader in your team and for yourself. Who'd like to start us off? Chisom.
I can go. Top 3.
Top 3 tips.
Okay. Lead with your heart, not just your mind, not just the short-term profit making, bottom line increasing. To be an authentic leader, you cannot be afraid to show your emotion, vulnerability, and you should also be able to connect with your employees. Focus on the long term, number 2, because it is important. I think leaders must understand that they have to nurture individuals, and in order to nurture a company, that takes hard work, patience, time, but this approach actually, it pays large dividends over time. So nurture your people, so as a way to nurture your company. And lastly, set clear goals and have high expectations for your team, because if you don't, Hyacinth talked about parents and children, if you don't believe in your kids, most of the time they don't even try. But if you believe in them and you say, yeah, you can do that, you actually give them the confidence they need to push forward. So provide equitable support. Don't provide the same type of support for everyone, because people are intersectional and they have differences, right? And give recognition and credits where credit is due.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chisom. Kevin, I'll come to you. Top 3 tips, please.
Yeah, so let's start with, I'm always going to say this, develop and practice some type of awareness, EQ and well-being at work routines. Get that started so that you know how to start your day, arrive at your desk, how to do meetings in an aware way, how to commute, use all those opportunities for training yourself. If anyone wants to have some tips on that, I'll send out cheat sheets on awareness at work and well-being at work and things. Send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn or Facebook at MindLab Oslo. Find me there. So that's the first one, develop and practice those routines. Second one is find a way of keying into purpose and meaning at work, because that means well-being. We've got a great quote here from Viktor Frankl, who was one of the fathers of positive psychology and was in one of the concentration camps, Second World War. He came out, survived that, and said, if you have a strong sense of why, you can handle almost any how. In other words, any type of circumstances in your life. And you don't need a grand vision for purpose. Just engage in a project that you experience as meaningful and it will take you there. That's the second one. The third one is be cool. And I warned you I was going to talk about cool as well the other day. And I don't mean being distanced or unfeeling. That's what cool has become to mean these days. It's rubbish, you know. The concept of cool came from 50s Afro-American jazz musicians. And they were cool. What did that mean? Not that they were cool and unfeeling and distanced. What they managed to do was to take that rage, that sort of response to the endemic racism of the time, and channel it into this extraordinary expression in their music, an expression of these really deep, powerful feelings. Like the Dalai Lama, they managed to transform them into something else, these difficult mental, emotional experiences into really skillful, creative responses. So that's a great practice, you know. Be cool, people. Take the difficult stuff and do the work that's necessary to turn it into diamonds and share it with the rest of us.
Awesome. I'm going to run with that tip. Adebayo will end the session with yourself. Top 3 tips, please.
Oh, thank you. The first one is discover yourself. You know, really find out who you are. Find out your strengths, your weaknesses. And then once you've been able to discover yourself, be your best, be your strength while you're working on your weakness, be your strength, and then bring that to work. So bring yourself into work. So that's the first one. The second one, I think I'll just reference to this lovely quote I have behind me that, you know, I've taken with me everywhere I've gone for the last 10 years. And it says that it is only as we develop others that we permanently succeed. So as a leader, you know, it's just helping you understand that it's always about your team. Your team's success is your success. You know, become an investor in people in your team. And then finally, linking both of them together, my final acronym for the day for the word team is together, everyone achieves more. So it's a collaborative effort. When people come together with the power of one mind, amazing things happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists today. You guys have been spectacular. Okay, wow, so much wonderful information came at us then, lots of learning, lots of alliteration, acronyms. I'm feeling refreshed, I'm feeling entertained. My gosh, this has been a session and a half. Okay, so now we're going to come to the audience and all of your questions, and thank you so much. If you've got any other questions that have popped up, please just pop them in. If you'd like to ask your question, just put your hand up and I'll come to you so that you can ask your question. Okay, so we had some questions here. I'm just going back through the chat to come back to your questions. And I know that, sorry, Nora. So Nora asked, is there a downside, and this any of the panelists can answer this, is there a downside to having to show up fully and not being able to have the divide between person and role? Who would like to answer that from the panel? So is there a downside to having to show up fully as a leader and not being able to have the divide between the person and the role? Kevin?
Certainly there's a downside if your footprint that I was talking about, which is the full 360 version of you, is not accepted at work, of course, because you're going to get lots of resistance and pushback and non-acceptance from your environment, so which is not going to support you in sort of bringing that out and bringing the value of that out. So that's why I said when I spoke about this, that one thing is your responsibility, which is to bring on that 360 you, and the other thing is for the organization to develop an environment which is open for that and the value of it. And some environments just aren't and are not willing to develop that either. So of course, then there's a risk that you will have to move on or engage yourself and move up and develop the environment yourself in a positive way. Yeah.
Okay.
As well, and I promise I will not geek out, but this is also where intersectionality comes into place. Right? Well, different people, like you're 10 different 20, 30 different intersectionalities, and each of those people are authentically you, right? So you do not necessarily have to come to work with all 30 of you, but your intersectionality that informs your professional self. You have intersectionality that informs your parents, or yourself as a parent, or as a spouse, or as a friend, or as a daughter, right? And I think that, of course, there is, there's always these fine professional lines, because realistically we live in this world and there is a professional way to behave. So I think that knowing and navigating that line also comes from self-leadership. So how do you show up as a professional at your workplace? Do you show up authentically professional the way you are? I think that is the question we also need to be asking. And then if that person is not celebrated or valued, then it's a leadership problem.
Yeah, and I would maybe just like to add to that as well, and just say from my personal experience, I have never been I'm not traditionalist, so I've never been that traditional patriarchal style of leader who is, you know, I love people. And so my love of people comes through in how I lead people. I am very people-centric, which means that I put them at the forefront, and I always sit down with my team, and I bring them forward. So who are you? What are you passionate about? What makes you you? And I learn all of that about my team so that they can bring their full self to the workplace. I bring my full self to the workplace. But they still know that I'm their leader, because I lead them when I need to be authoritative. I'm authoritative, but for the most part, I empower people. I disciple people. I think discipleship is really key when it comes to being an authentic leader. We're raising up other people to replace ourselves effectively. And if you're not doing that as a leader, when you are doing that, you don't need to fear there being this line that's muddying in the waters. Adebayo, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, just to agree that it's not something that's easy, and no employee wants a wimp or a crying baby as a leader just because they're being authentic. um but for you to get to that point where you feel safe enough, where you can trust your team enough, where you have that relationship enough with them to break down to say, oh my God, this project is incredibly hard, to deliver right now. It takes time, and it takes that building of that relationship. And if you can get to such a point, wow, it's going to be amazing. Why? Because your team will step up for you. You know, they'll step up and say, what can I do to help? And they won't take their own big rocks and place it on your shoulders, because they already know that you're going through a lot. They will get on with the day's job. So it's a beautiful place to arrive at, but it's not something that we are used to in the corporate industry anyway, especially again going back to like consulting or banking or construction and so on. And so it takes time. It's achievable, but it takes time.
Yeah, which leads me into Gina's question actually. Could showing up as one's full self not be well received or be suitable to some roles, some organizations, like you just said, banking, etc.? So what is your take on that? Being an authentic leader, could it not be suitable for some roles?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll give an example. I have a friend in a consulting firm, at senior management level. And one day he gets a call from his MD, and the MD said, "Listen, all our clients are excited about your work, your projects, what you've been delivering. You've been delivering success. They're happy about it. But there's one thing that they just don't get about you." And it's like, oh, you appear to be too soft with your team. You're not driving them hard. You're not, pushing them. You're not. And it's, well, like, listen, am I creating the success you need? Yes. Am I delivering the results on time? Yes. This is how I'm getting it done. This is my leadership style. This is who I am. And the MD then appreciated that, and now they've been going through some mentorship, coaching, processes to help him further develop that. But you can imagine that's not something they're used to in the consulting firm. They're giving you tasks, you have to achieve it by this time. If you're not succeeding at this rate, you're out of the company. And so do you wear a mask? Do you pretend? Do you do that? No, be yourself, and hopefully your results will back up your leadership, your traits or style.
Mm-hmm. Earlier, Chisom mentioned participative leadership, and Kirsty was asking, are there any downsides to that style of leadership?
I already answered on the chat, and yes, it was mainly that it could take longer time to make decisions, but of course you can put in processes to streamline, as Gina also noted. I wanted to just make a quick comment as well to, was it Gina's question that I just answered? I think that showing up as your authentic self, we also need to make calculations. Which culture are you in? There are some cultures where you have to be authoritative to get results. And even if we look at it outside of, say, a works, like a corporate space, in Nigeria, for example, and many may not agree, but this is my experience. When I go back, and, like being very American, like, hey, how are you? Like you're nice to people and they're happy, you're nice to them. I find oftentimes that when I go back to Nigeria, sometimes I go into stores to buy something. If I come in there like, hey, how are you? I'm ignored, I'm not served. But when I come in there feeling all high and mighty, then I'm taken seriously. So I think culture also matters. And I think where intercultural communication or cross-cultural communication is involved in situations like this, you have to look at how different is the Japanese culture or the Chinese culture to the Norwegian culture. And I think that plays a role in how you can bring yourself to work, because maybe you need to bring your authoritative self to work, even if it's not comfortable, but it's what gets the job done. So just wanted to nuance that as well.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Nikki asked, do you have any tips for employees so that they could encourage transformational qualities in their leaders?
I'm not going to answer that question because Nikki is so I'm going to have somebody else answer that.
Anybody want to jump on this, Adebayo?
Yeah, I think that's part of creating entrepreneurs out of employees in the first place. Every employee should be able to see themselves as business owners within their job functions, and their leaders become like their clients that they engage with. So be thoughtful about, if I was in this person's shoe as a leader doing this, what are the resources I would need? What are the support I would need? What are the expectations? And then, deliver that and be human. If you notice that they are not themselves, especially having built that relationship with them, when they're happy, if they need a cup of coffee in the morning before they talk to you, if they spend the first 30 minutes on emails, being aware of their personality and characteristics will help you determine when to step into, to encourage them or to help them. And there's nothing wrong, sharing resources. If you discovered a great book or or webinar or workshop, or one like this from Diversify, to say, wow, I attended this workshop and it was great, here's the link, if you have time, see if you can attend it, then pass that on to them. We've come beyond, or we should have come beyond, the place where we're expecting everything from our leaders, but we're also now providing, and that shows that we are also ready for leadership.
Perfect. Thank you so much. My one tip for employees would be to empower them to be able to let you know what they need from you. So everybody needs different things. And so in having conversations with your team, you say, okay, tell me how you would prefer for me to lead you. What do you need from me? And that way you can bring the best out of them by, it's like the 5 love languages in relationships between couples. It's the same thing when leading a team. Everybody's got their personal leadership language, love language, and it's kind of tapping into that. So yeah. Kevin, you wanted to add to this?
Sure, I do. Yeah, I really believe in that old adage that we get the leaders that we deserve, whether it's politicians or it's leaders at work or whether it's in our families or whatever, you know, that we need to treat them the way we want to be treated ourselves, which generally means, you know, they need to be seen and heard and respected and treated as human beings as well. And I know some of the leaders that I've got to know, that's been the key really, that has allowed us to work in a much better way, is that when we've got onto that level of, it's almost like, you know, being a parent. Probably most of you here are parents. When you get to that stage when you can sort of let go of roles, even though they're still necessary, and treat each other as human beings, treat each other as grown-ups, whatever it is, and then suddenly lots of new opportunities arise and different perspectives are possible. So I would say that, you know, we can all have a collective responsibility to treat leaders beyond their role, and they can treat us beyond our role as human beings. We've all got the same needs, you know, none of us want to suffer. We all want to be happy and content. We all want to have the opportunity to develop and grow as people, relate to each other on that basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Gina's asking again for...
Sorry, Emma just asked Nikki, call in or call out. I just wanted to comment on that.
Okay.
I think it depends on the leader. For me personally, I prefer both. I want to be called out when I do something wrong or when you think I do something wrong, but also in a way where I feel like I'm called in. But I think you have to approach situations based on the specific leader and, you know, yeah, you know, like both Kevin and Adebayo said, you know, who are the leaders and are you addressing them and dealing with them the way that they are? Are you meeting them where they are?
I sort of agree, Chisom. I don't think we disagree there. It's sort of, you know, I'm not only saying be kind to someone, but, you know, be direct and honest too. Dare to do that with a leader. And other times I've done it, I've either been out of the organization, out of the team, off the team, or I've had a completely different relationship of respect with the leader that I've spoken out.
So there's definitely an element of ownership, of upskilling yourself as well as an employee, not just for the leader, you know, to learn some basic psychology of interaction with other individuals and you know, seeing what works and what doesn't work. So coming back to Gina asked the question, for those of us who work with young people, what are some key elements we should integrate to enable them to recognize and feel comfortable showing their authentic self? So for those of us who work with young people, what are some key elements that we should integrate to enable them to recognize and feel comfortable showing their authentic self? Chisom. Adebayo, you.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say I've worked a lot with young people. Though I have as well. But you know, just having a 9-year-old daughter, and you know, just bringing her up as well is just constantly be there to you know, celebrate who they are, and also be there to pinpoint that they don't have to pretend to be what they're not. You know, sometimes, you know, she'll come back and speak in a funny voice, or you know, try to act in a certain way, and you know, I'm like, hey, stop that, stop doing that, because that's, that's not who you are. That's not, stop pretending to be somebody else. And it's yeah, again, discovering this, helping them discover their personalities. Maybe, taking them, if they're youths, for instance, maybe taking them through some personality tests, and helping them find out their strengths, their weaknesses as well. And they're working on those around that. Yeah, I wouldn't say I have the perfect answer for this, but yeah, those are just my thoughts, really.
Thank you, Adebayo.
Lead by example to that. And I think more or less Adebayo covered it in by encouraging somebody to be authentic and celebrating them. You are, in some sense, also leading by example, because you can say to someone, I want you to grow, I want you to develop, I want you to be a leader, but then you don't actually act like it. So I think it's important to practice what you preach and lead in that way.
Yeah, having run workshops, I used to run a project called Dance for Fun. We used to excuse me, we were using dance as a fun form of exercise in the community. And one thing that I did there was I learned to speak their language. And I empowered them. So also what Adebayo was saying about upskilling them. If you find a way of doing the personality test, etc., to kind of enlighten them, because quite often they don't know who they are. So when you can speak life into them, as in speak who they are as an individual, reveal more of themselves to themselves, that empowers them. And then when you also give them that authorization and equip them to lead and put them in that role, even though they might not be ready for it, just that belief that you give them really empowers them as well. So I found that really worked. When I was doing those workshops, I used to deputize people. I used to say, okay, I see this skill in you, this quality in you, this, and they would really then, flourish under that and through that, because we say, really, do you really see that in me? And I'd say yes. And so they flourished through that and came up as leaders. So real discipleship. Right, so we have 9 minutes left. Are there any questions that I have missed here that anybody would definitely like to ask? Sorry, Kevin, you have your hand up.
Just very briefly on that one with younger people, I think two things occur to me. One is that to really, it's been said a little bit, addressed a little bit, really understand the generational part of people's inner world, I have two 20-some kids, and sometimes it's like science fiction. I know for them, the way I think, my generational way I think is Jurassic Park. And for me, their way they think is sort of science fiction, which I love. So to try and get a grip on that, really, and understanding of the generational reality take they've got on reality. And the other thing is just the stuff that's beyond generation, that, help them understand how to work with negativity and positivity, naturalize negativity. We all got this negative bias, and help them build positivity, which is really important at the moment because of all the negative impressions they get from social media, and not least.
Absolutely. And, for the first time in history, we've got 5 generations in the workforce. So navigating that can be a bit of a minefield, because each generation has a different perspective on how they should be and interact within the workforce. So, yeah, that can be quite a challenge. Susanna asked here, I'm going to ask this question I missed. As a leader, how do you find time to upskill or reskill yourself and your team while managing a hectic work schedule or a large team or challenges in your personal life? So Chisom, I'm going to ask you that. As leading 3 companies, how do you actually find time to upskill yourself?
Don't sleep a lot. No, but seriously, I think it's in setting priorities, because I cannot run my companies efficiently without my people being valued and efficient and productive. So I'm quite intentional about setting alarms on my phone to tell me once a month, what new thing have you introduced to your team? Who has come to give a talk? Because it's easy to forget. And when you're quite busy, time can just fly by. So just making it an intentional process, something I remind myself of, helps me with regards to my team, and also sometimes getting feedback from them. I like to think that most of my team, if not all of them, know they can always come to me, and receiving feedback of something they maybe recognize or realized. And if I didn't see it, or if I had that blind spot, it's also kind of like, maybe I should bring someone in. And for me personally, I genuinely love to learn. I love to consume knowledge. I think that if I'm not learning something every day, I should be dead. So if I'm alive, I need to actively engage in that learning process. And I just try to make it fun for myself. And in creating schedules, I read a lot of books. So I read first thing in the morning and last thing before I go to bed, so just things like that. And it's hard because I also have a small girl who wants a lot of attention and who I love to be around. And sometimes it means trading, trying to figure out what do I trade up on, sleep today and time with my daughter or time with my employees. So there's no clear answer to this. I'm learning as I'm going, but one of the things I'm quite set on is that I need to learn every day something new from my team, from people, from experts. And I also need to build my team and also encourage them. Just to round up here, I think one of the things I say to them as well is I expect that 80% of your time is work and 20% of your time is learning and upskilling. And if there's something that you want to learn, let me know and we'll find a way to support you either with the extra time off or even by paying for that said course.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a leader that taught me the importance of time blocking, and she actually factored in, she said it was her responsibility to take ownership for herself as a leader to upskill herself because, she needed to increase her knowledge in order to lead us well. And so, like you said, what you're doing, Chisom, she just time blocked, and so we all knew. We had access to the calendar, and we all knew this particular time she was not going to be available for the team because that was blocked time for learning and upskilling. And she made all of us do the same thing as well.
I think that's really good. And also, how do you do that learning, I think, is really important, because I remember a project years ago, I interviewed about 100 corporate leaders, and the one thing that they were all sort of lacking was the ability to reflect on their experiences. They got lots of new knowledge and stuff like that thrown at them in different ways all the time. So, it's either to get a coach or to block off some time so that you can actually reflect upon your experiences and all the knowledge that's thrown at you. I think otherwise we're on the treadmill.
Absolutely. Right, well, thank you so much for today. There's one new comment. Yes, introspection is also key. Thank you, Chisom. If I didn't get to any of your questions or comments, I do apologize. I do want to end this session on time. So just want to say thank you so much for attending today. We'll let you know as well that the team will follow up with any resources, alliterations that have been given today, or anything that we feel will be of real value for you. We will follow up in an email so that you have all of that information from this session. We thank you for your participation, and we encourage you to join us next time. So we will have a break in July, so there will be no D&I session in July. This is where we all shed a tear. But we're going to come back in August refreshed and ready to roll out the next session, which Nikki, can I ask you to assist me here?
It's August 25th.
August 25th.
And I think our topic is anti-racism and intersectionality. So Chisom is going to go to town.
Yes, that's Chisom's favorite word. So if you really want to see her take off, then be here. So again, thank you all so much. And, you know, massive welcome again to all of the people who are new, who've joined us for the first time. And, you know, thank you for everybody who's joined us, you know, before. You keep coming back for more. We love having these conversations with you. If you have any suggestions for topics that you would really like us to cover, then please let us know that as well, because that would be really helpful to us. And also, if you've got any suggestions of any leaders who are really making waves in any industry where diversity and inclusion are concerned, that you think could be good panelists, please suggest them to us as well and let us know. Or if you're a D&I specialist yourself and you would like to be involved, then let us know. But thank you very much. Thank you, Kevin Reeder. Thank you so much, Adebayo Onafuwa. I think I pronounced that correctly. And thank you so much, Chisom. And thank you all for attending. Thank you, everybody.